So this green component block will tell me which individual elephant sprite was clicked on, 1, 2, or 3. So if I replace this drop down with component, now whichever elephant I click on, that particular elephant will disappear. Great. Now we'll do the same thing for all of the mice sprites. So I'm going to get out that same event handler. When a sprite type is clicked, I'm going to change it to the mice sprites. I'm going to go over to my looks drawer and get my hide block, and again use that component block to have that particular mouse sprite disappear. So now I should be able to click on any sprite and that particular sprite will disappear. The other thing we need to happen when we click on a sprite is have our score increase or decrease. Let's create a score variable to keep track of what our score is. So I'm going to go over to variables and initialize a new app variable. I'm going to call this variable score. And when the game first starts off, our user should have a score of 0. So I'm going to initialize this variable to 0. When I click on my elephant sprite, I want my score to increase by 1. So I'm going to go to the variables drawer and select the change app variable score by 1 block. And that will have our score increase by 1. And for the mouse sprite, I'm going to do something similar, but this time I want my score to decrease by 1. So I'm going to change app variable score by -1 to decrease my score. Looks good, but you see now if we test this, my score still doesn't change in my label. And the reason is that I am changing the score variable, but I'm not showing that score variable in my score label. So what I also need to do is set my score label's text to app variable score. So I'm going to add that to both event handlers at the end. And now I should see that label change to reflect what the score variable is. And you can see when I did that, that now the score label doesn't say score colon. The way we can add that is by doing just a join block. So every time we actually set the label's text to the word score colon space and then the number app variable score. And so now every time my label will say score colon and then the number. So now I see score 1, score 2, score 3, score 2, score 1, score 0. Great. Next, what we need to work on is what happens when we click on the reset button. Remember from the example app, what we want to happen when we click on the reset button is all of the sprites should now reappear and move to random locations within the stage. So this event is when the reset button is clicked. So I'm going to get that event handler out. And I want to show and move all 6 of my sprites. But it would be quite tedious for me to go through and individually show and move all 6 sprites. What we can do instead is use a for each loop to move and show all the sprites of a particular type, because we want to do the same thing to all the sprites that belong to a type. With only 6 sprites, it's not that big of a deal, but imagine if we had, say, like 10, 20, 50 sprites of each type. It would be super tedious for us to go through and move and show each individual sprite. So to make our lives a little bit easier, we can use a for each loop so we just have less coding to do. So let's get a for each loop out from the control panel, and it's this block that says for each item j in list. And remember, we're going to be able to iterate through a list and do something with each item in that list. So I want to iterate through, let's start with the elephant. So I'm going to iterate through a list of all of my elephant sprites. So we're going to say for each item in list, and I need to get a list of all of my elephant sprites. This is in the add and remove drawer, and it's this new block that we talked about, all sprites in, and then it has a sprite type. So we're going to iterate through all the sprites in the elephant sprite type. To make this a little bit clearer, I'm going to rename this variable to be elephant So I'm going to say for each item elephant in my list of all the elephant sprites, I want to first show that sprite. So I'm going to go to my looks and I'm going to do show. And I don't want to just show elephant 1, elephant 2, elephant 3 every time. I want to remember the for each loop is going to go through my list of sprites one at a time. First elephant 1, then 2, then 3, and do the code inside of here for each one. So I don't always just want to show elephant 1, I want to show each one at a time. And this new local variable called elephant is what is representative of that sprite in each iteration. So I want to go to my variable store and use this new variable called elephant that I just created right here in my side of my for each loop. So I'm going to show elephant. And in fact, maybe I'll even rename this variable to something a little bit better, like elephant sprite. Oops, I misspelled that. So I want to show each elephant sprite and also move that sprite to a random XY coordinate within the stage. So this is going to do a motion, and we want to move each sprite to an X or Y position. So I'm going to grab this block, and the sprite I want to move is again the elephant sprite in this particular iteration of the for each loop. So I'm going to go to my variables drawer and get the elephant sprite block. And remember, we can move sprites to a random XY coordinate within the canvas by selecting a random X and a random Y value that is between the largest possible X value and the smallest possible X value. So we want to select a random number, so we're going to go to math and get a random integer within a range. The lowest possible X value that's on the stage is 0. And the highest possible X value that's on the stage is going to be this, which is actually the right edge of the stage over here. That's going to be the stage's width. And so that'll get us a random X coordinate that's between the left edge at 0 of the stage and the right edge, which is the stage's width. For the Y value, again, we want to select a random integer. The lowest possible Y value that's on the stage is 0, and that's the top edge of the stage. And the highest possible Y value is the bottom edge of the stage, which is the stage's height. So now I'm going to select a random Y coordinate that's between the top of the stage at 0 and the bottom of the stage, which is the stage's height. And so now every time I click the reset button, I should see all of my elephants move to random locations within the stage. Then we want to do that exact same thing for the mice. So I'm just going to do this whole pattern over again. So I'm going to start with my for each loop. This time I want to iterate through all the sprites in my mouse sprite type. I'm just going to rename this local variable to be mouse sprite just to keep it a little bit straighter in my head. Again, I want to show all of those sprites. So I'm going to show, and again, I'm going to use that new local variable called mouse sprite. You can find that block in the variables drawer. And I also want to move all of those sprites to a random location. So I'm going to move my mouse sprite. For the X coordinate, I'm going to choose a random integer between 0 and the stage's width, which is the lowest and highest possible X coordinate on the stage. And for my Y value, I'm going to choose a random integer between 0 and the stage's height, which are the highest and lowest possible Y coordinates within the stage. So now every time I click the reset button, I should see all 6 sprites move to random locations. And then I can click on them, my score will change, they'll disappear. And again, when I click reset, they'll all show again, and they can still move. The last piece of this is I also want all of my sprites to be in random locations like this as soon as the app opens. So basically what I'm going to do is say when my canvas loads, which is in the events drawer, I want to do everything that I just did in the reset button. So I'm just going to copy and paste this. So now every time I refresh the app, they move to random locations as well. And that's it. That's the whole clicker game. Please submit that to Canvas with your project details page link, and you are complete. For homework, you are going to complete a new game that uses a lot of the same elements as the clicker game. And this game is called Whack-A-Mole / Spooky Smash. I tried to make it a little bit Halloween themed to be a little fun with it. You can find all the details about it on Canvas. As always, I've written out all of the instructions on how to create the game and what things to include in your game. I broke it down by screen. There are 3 screens in this app: a home screen, a game screen, and a game over screen. The home and game over screen are mostly just design. There's not really any blocks to them, so the main chunk is your game. I also included for you a link to the example and some assets that you need. So I'm going to show you what this game is about on my phone here. I actually need to find it on Thunkable real quick. Okay. So over here on the left-hand side is my Spooky Smash game. So this is the home screen. On the home screen, we just have instructions on how to play the game. The purpose of the game is you have 2 different kinds of sprites. For me, I have pumpkins and ghosts. You want to smash the pumpkins and avoid the friendly ghosts. So on your home screen, I put in the instructions that you should have labels and or images that explain the directions of the game. You don't have to be as explicit with it as this is. Just like a label that describes how to play the game is fine by me, but just something on the home screen that shows the user how to play the game. And then the other requirement on the screen is just a play button that navigates the user to the game screen. So I have that button right here, and I click play. And so what happens is, we've seen this movement, right? I have 3 of each of these types of sprites: 3 ghosts, 3 pumpkins, and every second these sprites are moving to random locations around the screen. So they're just constantly moving all around the screen. And I'm just going to wait for it to finish. I can show you again. I'm going to click play again. You can see in the top left-hand corner that I have this timer. It starts at 20 seconds and counts down by 1 every second. So the user has 20 seconds to play the game before, once the timer reaches 0, is when we get navigated over to that game over screen. And so you're going to use a timer component, which I have listed out here in the instructions, number 8, a timer component with an interval set to 1 and loop set to true. So you're going to use a timer component both to count down the clock and also to move all of the sprites to random locations within the stage every 1 second. So the other thing that happens in this game is when you click on the pumpkins, which are the good sprites, you can see my score in the top right-hand corner is increasing by 1. And every time I click on the ghosts, which are the friendly sprites, you can see my score is decreasing by 1. You can also go into negatives, that's fine. And the goal is to try to click as many pumpkins and as few ghosts as possible before time runs out. So on my instructions here, I say that you have to have at least 1 sprite type of characters that increase your score. So for me, those are the pumpkins. And you have to have at least 3 of that kind of sprite. You can have more if you so choose. And then you're going to have a second sprite type of items or characters that decrease your score, which will mirror the ghosts, and you have to have at least 3 of those as well. You'll have a label that displays that timer counting down from 20 or 30 seconds, whatever amount of time you want to use. And then a second label that displays the user score, which will start at 0 and increase or decrease by 1 as your user clicks on sprites. You'll use a variable to keep track of the time, as well as a variable to keep track of the score, and a timer component that will control the clock ticking as well as the sprite's movements. Down here, I explained some of the event handlers that you will have in order to make the game function properly. You'll use the when a user clicks on a sprite type block that we just used in the clicker game for both sprite types to say what happens when a ghost versus a pumpkin is clicked on. You're going to have a conditional statement to check to see when the time reaches 0, that's when you need to navigate to the game over screen. And you'll have to use a when the game screen opens event handler in order to reset all the variables. So resetting the time back to its starting time and the score back to 0 and all of those good things. On the game over screen, you just need a couple things. A label that just reads game over, which is what I have written out here. A second label that shows what the user's score was. So you can see my final score in this playthrough was 3. And you'll have 2 buttons that just navigate to each individual screen. One that navigates home and one that navigates back to the game screen. For the assets for this game, you need to have at least 2 different images for your sprites. You cannot use the default Thunkable Beavers. You must use something different. You do not have to use the sprites that I have here or the images that I have here. You can use whatever you'd like. But you do have to have 2 different sprites that represent each sprite type. And in my game, I used this sort of textured background image throughout all the screens. You are welcome to use that image if you'd like, but you do not have to have a background image at all if you do not want one. Great. At the bottom here, I, again, linked to the example of the completed app, so you can take a look at that, as well as the documentation about sprites on Thunkable's website if you want to take a look and refresh yourself about that. And a rubric as usual. So that is all I have for you today. Just a reminder, again, to submit the clicker game on Canvas once you have that completed. That is due before next class. And then before next class, you will also work on the Whack-A-Mole/Spooky Smash game. All right. Thank you, everybody, for taking the time to watch this lecture and build this game along with me. I wish you the best of luck on the Spooky Smash game, and I will see you all in class next time. Thank you so much.